hear from Noah Bowling, who is one of our kindergarten teachers who has been here almost as long as I've been here, so I think 19 years. And then you'll hear from Guyby Slangen, who is our Director of Community Engagement. You'll hear from students, and you'll hear from Jennifer Stewart, who is another one of our teachers who will talk about integration. And so that's just a sense of the afternoon. I just wanted to briefly mention that we are glad that you are here. We have this plan to talk to you about all of these different things that make our school distinctive. And we are the only Quaker school in the Bay Area, although we are part of a 300-year tradition of Friends education, providing strong academics and also attending to the emotional and spiritual growth of students. And we do that through Quaker values. The Quaker values, the acronym is SPICES, which stands for simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. And hopefully you've come to one of our information sessions. If not, we have a few more on the calendar that you can sign up for. We also have student panels and parent panels, lots of different ways for you to learn about our school. I've also been sending out a weekly newsletter with clips, video clips of teachers talking about curriculum. So trying to help you get a good sense of our school community. As I mentioned, I have been here for 20 years at our school, and I'm also a parent here. So I have worn 2 hats and will hopefully help you get a sense of our community. And so with that, I will turn it over to one of our kindergarten teachers, Noah Bowling, and let the teachers and students take the rest of the program away. And so with that, Noah.
Thank you very much, Yvette. My name is Noah Bowling, and I am a kindergarten teacher here at the San Francisco Friends School, and also a parent like Yvette. And in kindergarten, we have been thinking and reflecting and discussing a lot about equity versus equality, specifically focusing on two of our 3 queries this year. How can I help things be more fair so everyone is included and thriving? And what do fairness and belonging feel, look, and sound like in our community? And I'm just going to share my screen here so you can get a little visual of something that we were using in our kindergarten classroom, talking about equity versus equality. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see that okay? Great, thank you very much. Visuals help our kindergartners in all sorts of ways. Specifically this visual, which you probably have seen before somewhere out there. And something that kindergartners are really focused upon is fairness. And sometimes when kindergartners are thinking about what's fair, they're thinking about everybody having the same thing. And obviously in this visual, that although everybody's having the same thing, the box on the left, it's not really equitable. And this is a way that our kindergartners start to understand that just because you have the same things doesn't mean that the tool might work for you. And so then we had some lessons about different tools that work for different people. So for instance, an astronaut wouldn't need some scuba gear. That wouldn't be an appropriate tool for an astronaut. But a jackhammer would work well for a construction worker. And then we started talking about some different paths to centered learning. We were talking about in kindergarten, sometimes that we're there, we kind of have a wiggle monster inside of us, and we're unable to kind of stay still or stay focused. And we talked about how we have lots of different tools in the kindergarten classrooms that we can use to help us become a more centered learner. And we have a great also visual, which I'm going to share with you in just a moment. I apologize for my rusty Zoom. I guess it's a good thing to be a little rusty on Zoom. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see that? Great. Thank you, Colleen. And this was a great visual which was created by one of our teachers, Lily, in the kindergarten classroom. And on the left is a picture of a wiggle monster, someone who just is feeling the need to move about and is not really doing their best work in the classroom. And we talked about some different paths to become the centered learner on the right. For instance, some students might want to get a drink of water. Some students might want to use our sensory path, which is a wonderful tool outside of the classroom where students can kind of go and have a little movement break. Some students might want to just take a break in our library and go to a nice quiet spot, or some fidget tools like the wiggle cushion, or we have some bendy tools. And we've also been working on a lot of different breathing techniques in the kindergarten classroom. So our kindergarten students were trying out all of these different tools and thinking about which tools work well for them to become a more centered learner when they are feeling like a wiggle monster. And then some students realize that maybe some tools don't work well for them at all, and that actually makes them a little more distracted or distracted. So what happened in our classroom was the bendy tools, the fidget tools, became a big hit. And a lot of students wanted to use them. And then a problem arose where students were realizing that we didn't have enough bendy tools for everyone, and that some of the students weren't sharing them, and that some of them were taking them apart. And so some of the fidget tools were a little bit larger and some were a little bit smaller. So we had a meeting for business, which is a wonderful Quaker tool that we utilize K through 8 and also in our faculty to come together to solve problems. And so we posed this problem to our classroom that the students weren't sharing the bendy tools and some of them were being taken apart. And then we just went into solutions where we were using our collective knowledge, our collective kindness in our community to really come up with some solutions to that problem. And the students came up with a whole list of different solutions. And then we kind of spent the time just threshing them out, thinking about what would actually work. And they came down to 2 solutions, which were to use the tools that work well for them. So if the bendy tool wasn't helping you become a centered learner, that's not a tool for you. And also to make the bendy fidget tools even so that each person is getting the same amount. And what was wonderful is after we kind of introduced that tool of meeting for business or meeting for business for worship or meeting for worship for business, then we unprompted, we had students just getting up in front of the classroom and making these announcements and just saying, I noticed a problem that a lot of kids are rushing into the coat room. And I thought that we might be able to solve this problem together. And it was just wonderful to see the students who were thinking about these queries and then being introduced to that tool of meeting for business and then having the chance to really kind of internalize that own learning and use that as a tool to help solve problems in their everyday life. So that's a little bit about Quaker Ed in the classroom. I think at that point, I can turn the floor over to Guyby. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Noah. Appreciate that. And I am going to build off of what Noah has shared with us and talk a little bit about how we, again, kind of put these values into action through service learning. So I'm going to share my screen, and I too have. So we are looking at a day in the life, but this is a project that actually happened over the course of the entire year last year. And it's, I think, a good example of how we put these values from our Quaker school core values, the spices, as you might be familiar with, and we take those words and put them into action. So first off, who am I? My name is Guyby Slangen, and as Yvette mentioned, my title here is the Director of Community Engagement, which is kind of a unique role in schools, but makes a lot of sense for us as a Quaker school. And one of the 2 kind of questions that guide my thinking and work here at the school are, how do we both contribute to and benefit from our greater community? Here we are in the Mission, or in San Francisco, or in the Bay Area, or even further afield. Looking at community through a different variety of different lenses. And then also, how do we do this in ways that support relationships? A lot of this is all about relationships and that are authentic, reciprocal, and sustainable. And you're going to see some photos of what this looked like pre-COVID. And then I'm going to share an example of what it looked like last year. So 2 of our goals for doing this work revolve around social emotional learning, SEL, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We believe firmly that students learn more from others when those others are different from themselves. Also making students aware of and appreciative of this difference. They learn skills to listen, to show respect, build empathy, build healthy relationships. And obviously, these are skills that not only help them here at Friends, but beyond as well. And this project kind of puts this all into context. So last year, actually for a long time, we've been doing a really cool project with our fifth graders and senior citizens around the city. And we still were able to do this project, but because of the pandemic, we had to shift things a little bit. Traditionally, this has been a project that kind of lived in and out of the drama program. But last year we kind of pivoted and did something different, which you'll see now. And basically the project revolves around this one kind of essential question of relationships and how do relationships help us learn? And we had two people that I'm going to highlight and feature in this project. We had Ever, a fifth grader last year who was 11, and her pen pal partner, Judy, who was 84. And the project starts with a question. What does it mean to grow old? Might we have a volunteer who would like to unmute themselves and read this poem for us? Any takers? Oh, thank you. We have, I don't know if I can see your name, but you can just maybe unmute and you can read it to us if you'd like. Oh, Otelia, go for it.
Hi, sorry, I was waiting to be unmuted.
No worries.
The little boy and the old man. Said the little boy, sometimes I drop my spoon. Said the little old man, I do that too. The little boy whispered, I wet my pants. I do too, laughed the old man. Said the little boy, I often cry. The old man nodded, so do I. But worst of all, said the boy, it seems grown-ups don't pay attention to me. And he felt the warmth of a wrinkled old hand. I know what you mean, said the little old man, by Shel Silverstein.
Thank you. I appreciate you volunteering and sharing that. And it's somewhat a sad poem, but I think the goal of this is to show the similarities that we might have with folks as opposed to the differences. And that was really kind of one of the goals of this project, is connecting folks who on the surface, fifth graders and seniors, may not have a lot in common, but really there are a lot of similarities as well as some really cool differences. So we kind of start with that, and then we learn more about seniors. We have a variety of community partners that we worked with throughout the years on this project. And last year they joined us via Zoom to share about their residents, to share about their clients that they work with, and all of the amazing things about their communities, all of the challenges that their community faces, particularly in the time of COVID, where seniors were really isolated, and all of the health risks. And also some of the amazing diversity of folks that are part of their community. So we heard from these community partners, and that helped raise the understanding of our students. And then from there, we connected our students with a variety of these organizations. We had 57 students in the fifth grade, connected them with 50 seniors, 8 of whom were monolingual Spanish speaking through these 4 partner organizations. And the goal was to correspond via handwritten letters. And here you see a collection of those letters, and the letters would kind of come here at the school. When we returned in person, we would deliver the letters to their classes, and you see the students holding up their letters here. And they were able to exchange probably anywhere from 3 to 5 different times over the course of several months. And the idea was just to kind of get a sense of who they are and share a little bit about each other, and really kind of build some connection and relationships. And that set the stage for interviews that they conducted. And we listened to a lot of interviews from StoryCorps. If you're familiar with that, they have some really great curricula. We also partnered with another organization down the street from us here in the Mission called Voice of Witness. And they are all about sharing stories. And we heard from our friend Cliff Mayotte, who is their education program director. And he's really committed his life to interviewing and really sharing stories. So he taught kids about skills of what types of questions to ask. How do you ask follow-up questions? How do you listen and be really fully present? And how do you take a story and really honor the person by turning that story and turning it into either a written piece or, in this case, a podcast? So that was super helpful. And then from those Zoom interviews that the students conducted with their seniors, they then turned those into podcasts. And we learned, we taught them about this program called Soundtrap. And they had to learn, it's basically like Google Docs, but for audio files. And they learned all about the tracks and the different tools. But essentially, this was really about editing. And we heard from Vinny Tong, who is the managing editor at KQED, actually, and happens to be a parent here at the Friends School. So it was really cool to be able to connect with her. And she told us all about her journey and the story and all of the different ways to edit a person's story. And that really helped kind of guide the thinking and acting of our students. And so then they turned those podcasts, those Zoom interviews, and the interviews were, anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes long, and they kind of condensed them into probably 8 to 10 minutes. And we were able to then kind of circle back with our senior friends. And I'd like to play a sample of one of these interviews from Ever and Judy right now. Give you a sample of what it sounded like.
Hello, my name is Ever Baker, and I'm 11 years old. I am a 5th grader at San Francisco Friends School, and I have a special guest with me here on my show today. Special guest, do you mind briefly introducing yourself with your name, age, and where you live?
Oh, yes. My name is Judy Goddess. I'm 84, and I live in sort of the middle Sunset.
Wonderful. Judy, my first question for you is, what do you miss about being a child, a teenager, or my age?
What I miss most, I thought about that one a long time, Ever, and what I miss most is the flexibility of the body, being able to move in any which direction, move quickly, move, I miss the flexibility. It's hard. I mean, I hike a lot, but getting up is an issue. It's not graceful anymore.
Yeah, I love moving around and running. I'm on a soccer team with my friend Eden, and we do a lot of running and conditioning where we run around a track, and it's just so fun. I can't imagine not being able to do that.
Or you ski.
Yeah, okay. Another question I have for you is, what is something you've accomplished as an adult that your younger self would be proud of?
Well, that I've lived so long. I mean, I never thought I would die. I never thought about it. That I would die early or anything else, but that I'm 84 years old is really a shock. So that's one accomplishment. That I have 2 sons and 4 grandchildren is another accomplishment. That I have a happy marriage is another accomplishment. I guess one of the first jobs I ever had was I ended up organizing to feed all the children in Chicago public schools, about 500,000 of them, breakfast, and we won. Every time I eat breakfast, I think, well, that's a lot of kids that we got breakfast for. So that was good, but there have been a lot of accomplishments. I've had a rich life, so I feel good about that.
That's really great.
So yeah, that's a little sample. And obviously Judy is an extraordinary human being, and it was just really cool to hear how they both connected through this project. So let's see. So circling back to the objectives here, a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge, a lot of takeaways that our students were able to do through this project. And it just had so many different layers and so many different elements. But ultimately, it really is about relationships and helping students learn about themselves and others. So that is it, I think. So I think after this, is it the students that are going to talk a little bit about?
Yes.
Quaker, yeah, okay, right on, cool. So I'll just hand it over to our 8th grade friends who are here to join us.
Okay. Hi, my name is Etta. I'm in 8th grade and I'm a class clerk along with 3 other students, 2 of which are here today, which means that we're kind of like in charge of representing the grade in some ways, whether that's coming to Zooms like these where we're talking to prospective parents, or like talking to the grade about problems that might have come up as a class, and then organizing meeting for businesses about these problems. So our most recent meeting for business was about our section names. So as a grade, we have 4 different sections this year, and it's been kind of a tradition to name them. So how this process started was we have a series of different meeting for businesses because we never want to rush the decision. And every meeting for business starts with a moment of silence. And then we also like to start after that by settling on the norms for coming up with these ideas and for like being able to respect other people's opinions. And then we start by brainstorming. So for these section names, we brainstormed a huge list. You can slightly see in the picture on that like wall is a list of all the different section names that we were coming up with, which were all sort of groups of 4. So like one idea was SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, Squidward, or what else was there? The one we ended up settling on was Cheetos, Fritos, Doritos, Tostitos. So once we have a huge list that we haven't narrowed down at all, we start by asking people to speak for any specific group of 4 that they'd like to. So we really put the emphasis on making positive suggestions for these names and not saying any reason why they wouldn't like a certain one or why a certain idea is bad just yet. And then slowly we start to cross out the ones that aren't being spoken for and the ones that people aren't really talking about very much. And then we also talk a lot about willingness to stand aside. So like how much your opinion and which name you want to be chosen matters like to you, and how much you feel like you could never like kind of stand aside and let the group kind of go with the group decision. So slowly that narrows down the contenders while still speaking for certain names and crossing off the ones that aren't really being discussed, but also definitely checking with the group to make sure the ones that we're crossing out are not ones that anyone feels extremely strong about that they really want. So again, over the course of many meetings for businesses, this like narrowed down the class names. And then usually we also like to put a lot of silence in between different class ideas and people speaking, so that people can kind of listen to their thoughts and think really about which ones they feel strongly about, which ones they are kind of neutral about, and then which ones they think are just really great options overall. And so slowly that continues to narrow down the contenders until we have one last section name. And that was the meeting for business process just for this kind of not really problem, but this topic, which was the section names.
Hello, my name is Paxton. I'm in the 8th grade. I'm going to be kind of building off of what Etta said. I'm going to be expanding on how she was talking about when we're trying to narrow it down, how to eliminate. And part of it is we want to come to unity. That's a very big part of our Quaker values. Unity is being united or joined as a whole. And that's very important to us. And there were several kids that asked why we weren't just voting on a certain name and saying, oh, voting would just be much easier. And we explained to them that part of this voting would only allow the people that voted for one answer to be truly happy. Whereas when we're trying to come to unity, one allows some people to realize which one they feel most strongly for, and it can also help narrow down by trying to not necessarily find everyone's number one, but maybe if it's everyone's number two answer, instead of just having some people that feel that's the right answer, the wrong answer, trying to come as close to unity as possible.
Okay, so an essential part of being a Quaker school for San Francisco Friends is the testimonies or spices, which I believe were touched on a little bit earlier. But to reiterate, the spices, it's an acronym for simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equity, equality, inclusion, and finally stewardship. And each year we focus on a single testimony, and this year's testimony is equity, equality, and inclusion. So we made sure that when we were doing our meeting for business, we incorporated these values. One thing was, especially when you're looking at unity rather than just voting, we wanted to make sure that everybody's voice was heard. That's part of equity and equality. Going around making sure that everyone who had something to say shared what they were saying, and that everyone's opinion was heard and was taken into account when making our decision. As well as clerks, our job was to facilitate the meeting for business, not to make the decisions themselves. We weren't crossing off names without talking to people. It was a group decision. And finally, you have the social justice element, which you might not see how that's related to section names, but it actually did end up coming into play. For example, one of the ideas was Kanye North, Kanye East, Kanye South, and Kanye West. And we started to think about whether those names were something that we wanted to represent our section. Kanye West is, well, an artist, also has strong political views, not all of which our school aligns with or agrees with. And we wanted to make sure the decision we were making was responsible and represented who we were as a school. So we decided to cross that off the list. In conclusion, our Quaker values are important to every part of our school, including things as simple as decision-making or choosing names for sections.
Thank you, students. I think Jennifer, you are up.
Hi there. Oops, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer Stewart, and I used to be an art teacher here for a very long time, and now I'm in charge of integrated curriculum. And I'm going to start by sharing my screen. By the way, the lovely person who was just speaking to you is named Onyx. He is in 8th grade. All right. So let me share this, sorry. It's so odd to speak out into the silence. Not used to that as a middle school teacher, especially. So here we go. So transdisciplinary work is really what I focus on, even though we call it integration. And that's because we call it integration because really it's about collaborating between the different disciplinary areas of our curriculum. In kindergarten, everything is transdisciplinary work because you're in this classroom, you're investigating things, math comes into it, science comes into it, reading comes into it, right? Like everything comes together beautifully. Somehow when we get to the middle school, everything starts being picked apart into its silos. And that's helpful for learning skills, but it's not helpful for kids to understand kind of the bigger picture of the world. So we have our separate classes, but I also go into those classrooms and I help teachers to create this curriculum that creates connections. I put here a quote by Leonardo da Vinci that talks about how everything connects to everything else, especially when you learn how to see. And that is one of the things that I am looking for. So subjects can be integrated with each other in different ways. And the sort of pinnacle of integration is somewhat what we're looking for, although we do the other kinds of integration. You can see in transdisciplinary integration, it really blends together. I really like this visual. Interdisciplinary, you can see kind of the connections and intersections. And then multidisciplinary, you can see the relationships. So again, transdisciplinary dissolves boundaries, and I will give you some examples of this in a moment. And it also usually focuses a lot on real world problems or themes. An interdisciplinary approach is like thinking about a theme that crosses a discipline rather than just blending it all together. And then a multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary approach, which is what most people in most schools do, which is, maybe you study one thing in one of your classes and then you make a connection to another class. So what does that look like? All that kind of formal education talk. I'm going to show you an example of a 7th grade project. This is an example of a POW, which is a problem of the week. We actually have, we still call them POWs, but they're problems of the month now, but POM sounds not as good as POW, I guess. So the math teacher and I worked together, and there were 2 different POWs that one came right after the other. So the students started out with, what is math? And then they went on to, how am I a mathematician? The How Am I a Mathematician was a poster, but it basically asked them to think about their own experience in life, like, I'm a mathematician who dances ballet, or I'm a mathematician who is an artist, or I'm a mathematician who's a baker. And then they had to think about the kinds of actions that they did as in that realm. So let's say in ballet, how do they use number sense in ballet? How do they use probability, geometry, algebraic reasoning, statistics, all of that. And then they had to write a word problem, right? Uh-oh, that went the wrong way. Sorry about that. Hold on. There we go. So the cool thing is that the 7th graders then went into their 3rd grade buddy classrooms, and they got to present, it's not presenting, sorry. They got to present their ideas about how they were a mathematician and what is a mathematician. So this is one of their slideshows that they shared. And in defining what a mathematician is, they spoke a lot about finding math in the world around them. And this is what they did to start the year, is they investigated all the different ways math occurs in the world around them. And they discovered math is everywhere. They also, I'm not gonna share this with you, I was gonna share a video with you, but I don't think we have time, about the bees and their waggle dance and how bees can be mathematicians too. And then they came up with a definition of this, what a mathematician is. So it's not only these people who have done achieved great things in math, but also everyone in the world using math. And again, this was a slideshow that they shared with their 3rd grade buddies. And then they shared some of their posters. So this one is about how Cassidy is a mathematician who's also a basketball player. This one is about how Nora is a climber who's a mathematician. And you can see in the different areas that they had to come up with questions for those different mathematical ways of thinking. Oops, I'll actually spend a little bit of a second there. And Ruby is a mathematician who's a figure skater. So trying to, again, bridge that what's happening in this like silo of math is actually not the way math is in the real world. That math is something that we use and encounter every day that helps us understand the world and live in it. So, chef. And then they asked the third graders what they were interested in, and they presented them with word problems that they wrote. So the third graders had to try their hand at these word problems. Sorry. So that is that project. And we actually have a seventh grader here, Zara, who I was gonna just ask a couple questions so that maybe you could hear from her in her own words what it was like to do these two problem of the weeks. So one thing that I wanted to ask you, Zara, is what is something that you learned from these first two problems of the week in math?
Hi, everybody. For something that I learned was just like, I knew that math was being used like around me, but with this project, it kind of forced me to like look into like specifics. And so I felt like I really just like learned a lot more about like how math is used around us. For how am I a mathematician, I did a soccer player. So I really went deep and I researched, and I learned a lot more about how I am a mathematician and how I use it in soccer. And I realized that, it can help me improve in many things such as sports. And for the first one, I really just learned that like it's used in so many things and just like specifically what it was used for. So I thought that was really interesting because it really just, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And then I was gonna ask you, because Zara is new this year, although it feels like she's been here forever and ever. I was gonna ask, how were these assignments different from assignments that you've had in math classes in other schools or in the past?
Coming from schools that really just, it was a math project, it was like equations, it was math problems. It was very different because it's kind of, it relates to you and kind of the world around you. Whereas it's not just equations and you're not trying to figure out just answers and like formulas and just like memorizing. So it was really different in that aspect, to the point where I was really looking at like who I am and how that relates to what we're learning in math. And I think that I really liked it. And I think it was very different.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. I'm gonna not ask you that last question because it seems like we're running a little over time and I wanna make sure parents have some time to ask questions, but thank you. And then I was just gonna share, what am I going back to? I think I'm going back here, hold on. Zoom issues, there we go. So here is this one. So next, I'm just going to talk really quickly about an 8th grade unit that we did, which was really super transdisciplinary. The math unit was obviously transdisciplinary in that it was a real world application, and we brought in all of these different strands of just topics from life. In our climate change unit, we did work in both the science and the math room. And I also did some art teaching to the kids. We brought in Jill Pelto, who's an artist who works with graphs and graphs of climate change. and Natalie Pena, who is an old student of one of our science teachers, who is a climate activist. So we had all of these different goals that basically were underneath the main goal, which is how are communities around the world affected by climate change? And to just show you how it was transdisciplinary, we actually even had a humanities goal too, is there were different goals for different subject areas that went to the same question. So the impact of extreme weather, the connection between landscape and climate change, data, demographics of a community, and how the impacts and actions against climate change are connected to those demographics. Students did so many different things. It was kind of wild, and maybe you'll get to hear from them in a second about all of the different things that they were asked to do to really investigate this very large and pressing issue. This is my model poster and a process book that I showed them. This is their presentation from Jill Pelto. And here's what happened. Students worked together in groups to create a topographic map, a watercolor landscape that was inspired by the graph of some sort of climate change, and a process book that talked about their research and how it changed their thinking. So here are the beautiful topographic maps that they worked on together as in small groups, and they made them by hand actually, which was pretty wonderful. And really you can see bits and pieces of the research that are connected to the maps. Some having to do with demographics and some having to do with natural disasters, and explaining how different things are connected. And then here are their beautiful watercolor graphs, and you can see if you look at the image of the barn with the fence in front of it, that is actually a graph of how climate is affecting crops. And then here are their process booklets that they had to make together too. So they had to do these in order to show how their learning developed over time. And they included graphs and different writing and pieces to show that. I'm not going to talk about that. Oops, I'm going to close this. And what I'd like to do is just ask some 8th graders quickly the question of what do you think the benefit is of solving a problem or understanding something by looking at a topic through a variety of different lenses? So, like, was it beneficial at all to learn about the issue of climate change, looking at it through math and humanities and science? My question. And you guys can jump in. Why not?
I'll share. I think it was very beneficial because I think if you just look at it from one angle of perspective, you aren't really getting the full story. And that's why I think that project was so cool, because first off, I got to research a country that I didn't really know much about. And then I got to see it from the angle of science and how how it's laid out, and like rivers and demographics of it. And then I also got to look at math, which is kind of like statistics and things like that. And so I feel like it was really helpful and cool to work on a project with aspects from science and math.
Yeah, adding on to what Paxton was saying, in humanities class, we've been talking about the concept of single stories, which is that the idea that we flatten people or cultures and kind of rob them of their humanity by only telling one part of their story and only hearing one perspective. And I feel that by learning about climate change through the lens of different subjects, we were able to avoid the habit of creating single stories and understand the issue of climate change.
Excellent. I'm going to actually, Colleen, do you want to take it back not to, unless you have something to say, Etta? I feel like parents might have some questions to ask. Or
Yeah. I was going to say, thank you all for your sharing your experiences. And parents, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We are all here available to answer questions. Gyvi, who's our Director of Community Engagement, Noah, kindergarten teacher, Jennifer, all of the students, let us know what your questions are. We have about 10 minutes left. And our goal for this event has been to show you what is distinctive about our school. I've heard from a few people here and there that a lot of the independent co-ed schools in the city seem the same. And so with this event, we were trying to highlight what's different about our school. Okay, question in the chat. How do you, okay, for the students, I'm guessing for the 8th graders, how do you feel that Friends has best prepared you for high school? The 8th graders are in the high school admissions process right now. Do you feel, this is Quaker applause, by the way. Do you feel that you are prepared for high school?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So one thing that Friends has really helped me with is like the teachers have really made sure that I'm comfortable with coming up to them and like speaking to them in case I have like any questions or any like specific problems on the unit or the assignment or the topic that we're learning about. So that's definitely something that I'm like happy that I've learned about and like got to experience is like asking for help when I need it and being able to come up to my teachers and also like knowing when to just kind of push through my like when a class might be hard and then knowing when to speak out about it and ask for
help. For me, I think this is going back to the testimonies again. I think the Friends School focuses a lot on community, and when thinking about joining a new community and going to high school, I feel really well prepared I've learned not only how to be a good student, but also how to be an active member of my community, how to support others, kindness, generosity, all of these qualities that are key to being a productive and good member of a community, which I think is a thing high schools look for a lot and are key to a great high school.
Okay, thank you. Another question for the students. Someone says, I'm curious how you see your Friends School education influencing your outside of school life. So your interaction with friends, your hobbies, and your engagement with the world around you.
I could talk about this a little bit. So one thing that was shared earlier was the spices. And I think I bring that into my outside self a lot, especially stewardship. I think because I will help encourage my family to maybe go help with the food drive, or sometimes for me, it'll even be the little things. If I'm walking home and I see a piece of trash on the sidewalk, I might pick it up. And then there's also peacefulness and simplicity. I feel like I try to bring those into my life as much as possible because I don't feel like anyone really enjoys arguing. And so I try my best to try and prevent those arguments.
Onyx, Etta, or Zara, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Kind of speaking to what Onyx and Jen were saying earlier about like looking at things from one perspective. I feel like in general, Friends has really helped me look at like countless different stories as well as just situations from different perspectives and just kind of like opening my mind to think about how other people might be experiencing similar things or different things, or how other people I don't know. Yeah, just thinking about other people's perspective a lot.
Okay, another question that is following up on the high school question. So maybe Guyve or Jennifer, this might be for you. So with the philosophy of no letter grades in our school, how do Friends School students demonstrate mastery? And it says when applying to high schools, but so actually maybe the question is more about what is on our transcripts.
Well, I can actually talk about that as
Okay.
Having been in a lot of different classrooms, but also having a son who went here and who's presently in high school. These 4 students that you see in front of you are incredible. And yes, obviously were chosen to come and speak to you. And kids who come out of here know how to talk. They know how to share their ideas. They know how to ask questions. They know how to not be afraid when they don't know the answer or they have an idea and it might be quote unquote wrong. That's something that we talk about a lot. So high schools see our kids' mastery through their application essays, through their interviews. Our kids interview beautifully. And even the most shy ones, we have this incredible theater program that has supported them in the way that they can stand up in front of a classroom and speak. Also, these kids can probably tell you how many times they've had to present. Presentation is a huge part of the Friends School education. And so that's really, you can see it.
I'd just chime in there, and thank you, Jennifer. And and without getting into the grades, no grades debate, I mean, that is only, that's one dimension of identifying strengths or areas of growth. And we take a more kind of holistic, comprehensive approach. And we have a strong record to back that up. And, high schools are aware of who we are, what we're about, the students that we produce and come out of this school. And we've had a really strong track record. And I feel like they know what a Friends School education looks like through these students. And they're hungry for it. And the students are the best examples of the quality and the impacts and the power and promise of this education. So I think that they are the best ambassadors of the school, and that shows well in high schools and more importantly beyond, and that is really about life skills, and it translates well in high schools. And obviously what we're teaching them is a lot more than that. So.
And high schools have also commented that they appreciate getting transcripts from our school because they aren't just a list of letter grades that don't talk about the student. They get narratives and more information about the student than just 3 A's and 2 B's on a transcript. Okay, let me see if I can get a couple more questions in. For the students, how much time at home is spent on homework? Do you feel like you're able to be yourself and have fun at school? Paxton, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'll definitely. That's something I do definitely think about a lot. I play soccer 4 days a week on 2 different teams. And for example, today I actually have practice for almost 3 hours. And so I'm not home that much. But I've still been able to find that homework is definitely manageable. And a lot of teachers will set time limits. So they might say, spend 20 to 25 minutes on this work. And for slightly bigger projects, they'll have a final due date that you can space out your work. And if you ever feel like work is taking too long, it's too challenging, teachers are always willing for you to meet with them at some point and talk about maybe a way to get more of it done or get it done faster.
I can also talk to this. Overall, I've never really had too much of a problem getting work done besides myself procrastinating. But especially in lower school, I really enjoyed the fact that we didn't have like a huge load of homework. I'm pretty sure we had quite a bit of reading. So we had like a reading log, and we would have just like choice reading where we could read anything we wanted and just kind of mark down the page numbers. And there was a certain like amount of time we were supposed to be reading every night or every week. I can't really remember. And then every once in a while, we would also have like a week-long assignment. So we'd get something assigned on Monday and it'd be due like the next Monday. But I feel like in all the grades, we've always, like the teachers have put a huge emphasis on making sure we know what the homework is asking of us. And a lot of it is kind of reviewing what we've done in class or making sure we're really solid on certain things instead of like learning new things while we're at home. That might be kind of confusing or complicated. That wouldn't make sense for a teacher not to be there and help us through.
A lot of people talked about our workload, which I'm in agreement. It's manageable and your teachers are there for you. But also to talk about the being yourself at school and having fun at school part of it. I actually think that's one of the most amazing things about Friends. I think we've tried to build a social environment where people feel comfortable being themselves and being their full selves, and that people have fun, people have friends. It's not solely just everybody, working on homework all the time or anything. I would say our community is definitely nurturing both academically and allowing us to have fun outside of school and in school.
Thank you all. And I'm just going to squeeze one last question in for staff and teachers. So Gaiby, Noah, Jennifer, can you give an example of how Quaker values would be integrated in academic professional development?
I can speak to that a little bit. So we always have at least one or two special Quaker speakers come to our professional development. And oftentimes they will support us in Quaker processes. So I've taught here for a really long time, and I've done a bunch of professional development on how to run a really good meeting for business or how to be a really good clerk. And it's something that you return to all the time. It's not something where you're like, oh, well, I know how to be, I know the Quaker values, check that off the list. It's something that we really explore together as a community. And it's one of the most amazing staff that faculty and staff that I've ever been a part of, in the fact that we actually start our professional development or our weekly meetings with moments of silence or meetings for worship, which also tend to bring our community closer together and really allow us to know how to trust each other and talk to each other. So, yes.
On my desk, I'm just pulling this up. We have this book, Leading in the Light, and one of our faculty members, Maureen, has offered to just put some copies of an article in this book that's celebrating 325 years of Quaker education in America. And she kind of framed this as an opportunity for us just to engage in these conversations of what it means to be a Quaker school. How are we animating these Quaker values? And tomorrow's faculty meeting, we have a little article that we're going to do a little turn and talk. And I mean, that's just one example that is countless. It's just ongoing. And I think it's fundamentally about two things. It's about humility, which Jennifer spoke about, that it's not just about checking the box. There's this notion of continually exploring and considering and looking at yourself as a professional and as a member of this community. And then that also tied with curiosity, that we really do kind of fuel this sense of inquiry, of asking questions, of reflecting, of, kind of always challenging our assumptions and trying to, be better versions of ourselves. So it's just ongoing.
Thank you. And so I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. We started late, so I went a little bit over time, but I also know that people have other commitments like making dinner, and Zara had to log off to go to soccer practice. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions, but I will save the chat and I will try to get back to those of you whose questions we didn't get to answer. And otherwise, hopefully this event gave you a good sense of our school community. And as I said, what's distinctive about our school as being a Quaker school here in the city. Do join us at our other events to learn more about our school. There was a question for the students asking, what would you change about our school? Just know that if you come to one of our information sessions, I always ask that question of students. So you'll be able to hear that answer if you join us at one of those. And then hopefully January, February time, we are hoping that we will actually, I think we can say we're planning to have people in the building so that you'll be able to get a real sense of the building and the space. Now that our entire lower school is able to be vaccinated, we are looking at having off-site visitors be able to come to the school. So stay tuned for that information. Feel free to email me if you have any questions about anything or need follow-up information. We are happy to answer any questions. And with that, I will release you to the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Yes, thank you all.